in other places, when the recording starts, a kind of a mechanical voice announces it. It's different here?
Yes.
Oh.
Reach that.
So, welcome everyone, and my apologies for what happened last week. It was a great technical fiasco. It was actually a fiasco that lasted a really long time. I kept thinking it was going to be solved, but it never was. And today started out as a similar fiasco, but with the help of a friend, we were able to get the laptop working properly. So I haven't been starting often with prayers, but I maybe it would be a good idea to just do a brief focusing practice, and then a motivation. And here we have, I think this prayer, the taking refuge in generating Bodhichitta, I think it's a very, very powerful prayer, partly because it is so brief and it covers so much in these few lines. And my habit had been in the past, instead of reading or reciting the entire prayer 3 times, which is very traditional, I always try to do, if I can, just reciting the last line 3 times. Because as we know from this prayer, the first 2 lines of it focus on refuge, turning one's mind towards the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And then the last 2 lines, on the basis of practicing listening to the Dharma, then comes the motivation to benefit other beings. So there's a lot of power just in the very, very last line being repeated 3 times. Why don't we give ourselves just a couple of minutes to find a comfortable, upright posture. I always find it helpful when sitting in a quiet, more or less upright posture and making the determination to avoid any extraneous motion. Once the body settles down from that quiet, calm space, we become aware that our body is in constant motion. It's a subtle motion. It's a very important one. It's a life-giving motion. And as long as we're alive, it happens. So it is the motion of our breath. And the breath, of course, is an exchange. We could look at it from one point of view as the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. But it's more than just the chemistry. It's an exchange between ourselves, our environment, and all the beings in it. So as the breath is flowing in, and we're not trying to modify it in any major way, we're just observing it, so that when the breath is going in, we're aware breath is going in. And when it changes directions and goes out, we're simply aware. We're making a mental note. Breath is flowing out. And one of my teachers remarked that when we're observing this breath and the air is coming in and the air is going out, we can think with the in-breath, what do we want to receive from the world? What do we want to receive from our environment and the beings who live in the environment? And we can give our own names to that. You might think in terms of health and support and connection, safety. And probably all of us can think of quite a number of different qualities that we'd like to receive from the world to make our life more meaningful, more beneficial, more complete. And then when we focus on that half of the breath in which it's going out, we can bring to mind, what is it that we would like to give to the world? We'd like to share with the world. And then we can elevate this entire inquiry by thinking of the meaning of the words of the 4-line prayer that's in front of us now. We don't have to necessarily say these words out loud, but if we like to, we can sing them or chant them. Some of us prefer to do it in one language and others in another language. And some of us prefer to do it silently. But I think for this occasion, I will read from the first 3 lines of this prayer rather slowly, so that we can cultivate an attitude which takes into account the meaning behind these words. And perhaps I'll offer a brief commentary on some of that. And then when we reach the 4th line, we'll recite that 3 times, just the last line, because this is the expression basically of what we want to give to the world, on the basis of having received from the world all the things that are conducive to our spiritual growth and our eventual enlightenment, then we wish to direct our attention to gaining that full complement of enlightened qualities so that we can be of benefit to others. And actually that one word, benefit, is really very much from at least one point of view, it's very much the quintessence of Dharma. There are unfortunately many people in the world today, because of very difficult life situations and so forth, that their attitude towards the world is not of beneficence, meaning wishing well to the world, but it's very opposite, maleficence. There are people who, for many variety of reasons, their default attitude is not what can I give others, not what I can do to make their life more pleasant, but how can I exploit them? How can I control them? How can I dominate them? And it's very peculiar, isn't it, that the people who have this attitude of wanting to somehow control or lord it over the rest of creation, controlling their own corner of the world, dominating some way, exploiting the others. Their motivation for this is to gain happiness. For example, the person whose business dealings are all quite criminal, wishing only to gain wealth by underhanded means. And if it were to be pointed out to this person, why are you doing all of that? They would say, oh, to become rich, to gain money. And then if we were asked, well, why do you want to be rich? Why do you want to have a lot of money? Well, first of all, they would probably laugh at that question. Isn't it intuitively obvious? Everybody wants to have money. Everyone wants to be rich. That's how you can get the things that you want. But it doesn't require too much reflection to realize that the kind of benefit we gain through devoting our life to material gain, fame, power, and so forth, while attractive from one point of view, is never satisfying. It's like a fool's errand, the kind of thing a foolish person does, the errand he or she runs, to gain the things that they think will give us happiness and security and benefit. But in fact, it never satisfies. I remember when I was quite young, I think I probably saw it on television, and I think our family was among the first to had television in the late 1940s. In fact, my younger brother was born in 1948, and my brother arrived as a newborn baby, and the television arrived at the same time, almost to the point where one could have thought of them as being twins. And since my brother became quite addicted to television, in a sense, they were twins. But I remember in one of those early programs I was watching, a comedian was saying, making a play on a very popular expression. He said, money can't buy happiness, but it can allow us to choose our own form of suffering. And that's quite significant, isn't it? That if the end result of becoming wealthy and by extension powerful and famous is not that we really become satisfied, truly happy, truly whole, complete, but rather that it gives us more opportunities to choose our own misery. That's quite a condemnation of the whole attitude of what's in it for me. Because the best that can be said from that point of view is what's in it for me is a choice between various evils. Clearly, having not enough wealth or possessions and so forth opens us up to rather extreme forms of suffering and unhappiness, even to the point of losing our life. So there's certainly a certain minimal amount that we need just to stay alive. Otherwise, our life will be finished very quickly if we didn't have food and clothing and shelter. But once that minimum has been met, how much true happiness do we receive from what we receive on top of that? So where does true wealth reside? Not the wealth of big bank account, power, fame, but the wealth that makes our life meaningful, worthwhile. And for me, one of the most powerful and most succinct explanation of this is a phrase that His Holiness the Dalai Lama is fond of saying. In fact, I've seen it on many bumper stickers. When he describes his religious orientation, he says, my religion is simple. My religion is kindness. And in any situation, you can always be kind. And that really does get to the heart of what true spiritual practice is all about. Finding out how to be a truly kind person. Sometimes we're faced with situations in which we have to choose between a lesser or a greater experience. But as the Dalai Lama says, in any experience, there's always a way, at least to a certain extent, of being kind. So the last thought I wanted to share was a story that made a very big impression on me when I was first in India in studying with Geshe Ngawang Dargye, the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives. In this story, or we could think of it as a legend or a myth, or as an actual event that happened in the past. To my mind, it doesn't make much difference which it is. It was a story of when the being who eventually became Shakyamuni Buddha, one who was born as the prince in northern India and grew up in a palace, eventually left the palace on a spiritual journey, and after a 6-year fast, sitting under the Bodhi tree, attained full enlightenment. Then spent the next 45 years of his life benefiting others. Well, the question sometimes comes up, when did this being, and I'll just refer to him as Siddhartha, though he hadn't yet been born as that prince, but it's easy to refer to him by that name. It's the name he will eventually have. The question is, when did Siddhartha first develop Bodhichitta? In other words, the wish to attain enlightenment in order to be of maximum benefit to others. And the story that's told was that at that point in his existence, he was living in a hell realm. The way it's described is that he and another hell being were shackled to a cart, and they were pulling this cart over very, very dangerous and suffocating landscape. And sitting on the cart in the driver's seat was this very demonic looking creature. And as they were making this way, pulling this cart over this difficult terrain, the being who became Siddhartha looked at his companion. Remember, both of them are shackled. Both of them are like horses dragging this cart. And the thought arose in Shakyamuni's, or Siddhartha's, probably even better, in Siddhartha's mind, when he saw the suffering of his companion. Somehow or other, it took him out of his own suffering. And he made a gesture in order to share the burden of the other prisoner who's shackled next to him. So he reached out to take the burden off of his other companion. And when the demonic figure saw this act of kindness and generosity and self-sacrifice, he was filled with murderous hatred. And he took his weapon and killed Siddhartha. But that act of dying in the hell realm immediately sent him to rebirth in one of the heavenly realms. So simply that one powerful thought of trying to benefit a companion, a powerful thought of, as His Holiness said, just trying to be kind. In any situation, there's always a way to be kind, at least to some extent. And that brings about such a monumental change in one's whole experience that, as told in that story, one can be instantly elevated from a hell realm to a God realm. And there are similar stories throughout the career of the person who eventually was born as the prince of the Sakya clan, met the teachings, attained enlightenment, and then taught the path to enlightenment to everyone and anyone who is interested. So if there's any element of that story, no matter how briefly told it was, any element that strikes you as true, I don't mean whether the story itself is literally true, but does it strike you as true that simply cultivating a heartfelt wish to benefit others can bring us out of our own misery and into a state of wholeness and true happiness? Are there things that you've seen in your lifetime which testify to the truth of this extraordinary transformation, which is attained not through any outward action, but a shift in consciousness, shifting the attention away from the I, me, mine mentality into the mentality of how can I benefit others, which is the very heart of the Bodhichitta motivation, the wish to become enlightened, which simply means to develop all of our good qualities, wisdom, compassion, loving kindness, and so forth, and reducing and eventually eliminating all the negative aspects of our heart and mind, typically greed, hatred, jealousy, and all of the other defilements. That transformation, the total transformation for Shakyamuni Buddha, is said to have taken 3 countless eons, which is an enormous span of time. But according to the legend, it started out of compassion for a fellow sufferer, the hell being who was shackled to the cart together with him. So that's a story, but perhaps there's something in that story that touches an experience you've had or seen or heard about, an experience of transformation, of transcendence. And if so, try to bring that to mind. And who are our guides as we follow the spiritual path to transcendence? In Buddhism, they are known as the three jewels, or as Khepsi Zopa Rinpoche always used to like to say, the three rare sublime ones. That is, the Buddha, the one who, through diligence and hard work, has awakened to the truth, has cleansed himself or herself of all limiting qualities, and has developed all the positive qualities to the maximum extent. The Buddha, the one who is awakened from the sleep of ignorance, which is what Buddha means. The Dharma, which is the method and the teachings such an enlightened being gives, showing others the way that they too can achieve this true benefit, the true benefit of being alive. Buddha, Dharma, and the third jewel of the Sangha, those who have gained high insight into the nature of reality by following the path, and can see the Four Noble Truths directly and serve as reliable companions to us as we follow the path. So, gathered here today, so I don't really know the other people here particularly well, having only contacted them through these little rectangles of Zoom. But somehow or other, everyone here has chosen to spend time at a center such as the Shivikarbha Tibetan Buddhist Center. Why? Is it because it's so comfortable? Is it because the food is so delicious? Or is there something they're exposed to in a center such as that, which gives them some direction in life, especially compared to the direction that's wandering the vast majority of beings are experiencing, running towards happiness only to find frustration. And of those three jewels of refuge, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, it is said that the actual refuge is the Dharma. Because it is our own knowledge of and practice of the Dharma that enables us to take the various steps that are necessary to move closer and closer to the fulfillment of our highest potential, towards the experience of enlightenment ourselves. So thinking of the part in our life that's played by the teacher, the Buddha, and the Guru, and all of the other great exemplars of the path, and of the Dharma, the attitudes that we've learned, that we've been trying to put into practice, some of which have shown themselves to be, even in a brief experience, to be very powerful in enabling us to transform an unsatisfactory existence into one of great benefit. And the Sangha, those who have followed the path, even to a greater extent than ourselves, and thus can serve as reliable guides. Who or what for us, in our experience, exemplifies Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha? Answering that question might have us look back over 2,000 years to find Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Or we might be able to find it by looking around ourselves, even at the present moment, 2 millennia after the time of Buddha, to see that the wheel of Dharma can turn in Sarnam such a long time ago is still turning. So out of gratitude for whatever we have gained, by having a life exposed and enriched by Dharma, we can slowly recite or just listen to the words of the first lines in this 4-line prayer. Trying to connect them to our own inner experience. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, until I have fulfilled my highest potential. With the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. And when, for the second time, we repeat this last line, see if we can place particular emphasis on the word at the beginning, may I. The word is a wish. May I become a Buddha. May I have that experience. A deepest wish. A life-affirming wish. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. And then for a third and final time, imagining that the transformation that we are wishing for is actually happening. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Before we move into a bit more discussion about the practice of offering, something that we started past weeks that I want to talk about a little bit more. Before we get into that, if anyone feels inspired or encouraged to put your own take on the spiritual path, on what you find life affirming and giving, by training the mind in the direction provided by the Buddha Dharma, or any other similar experience, not something that you're supposed to feel, not something that makes you a religious person, but something that you have actually gained, actually experienced in this life. It might be rather small, but even any small light of understanding reveals the path to full awakening. So without wishing to put anyone on the spot, if anyone would like to say anything now, then you can unmute yourself and then share it with the rest of us. And if there's nothing, we'll just move on. But I'd really like to give people here a chance to express something from the inside, because when people speak the truth with their own experience, no matter what it is, it always finds echoes in the hearts of others. And in that way, community actually happens. Is there anyone who would like to share a few words or thoughts about this?
I've had a few experiences of brief, generally of just I guess you might say a kind of experiences of light and opening to just a greater awareness and love, in kind of a broad sense of possibly seeing God if I was, I think it was kind of opening a mind of compassion. Maybe I'm not sure I actually formulated it, conceptualized it that way. But opening of heart and mind, and some very they were profound. I had one experience like that when I was 10 years old.
Mm, mm,
About 10. Yeah, just I was standing on the dock of our little lagoon, and just a 10-year-old kid, right, riding around on his bike and whatnot, and put my hands in my pockets, and for some reason I was overjoyed to find I had no money in my pocket. I had nothing in my pocket, and I felt so free. So that's that was a very profound experience then
mm,
for me. I don't know where that fits with compassion and bodhicitta, but it was an opening.
mm.
It's very important. And I've had some other experiences like that. So anyway, that's the clearest one. It's the oldest one and the clearest one for me.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Especially that often when we think of childhood and we think of something that's exciting is when we find something, like when we find we have a dollar bill. We didn't expect to have a dollar bill, and we find it. Wow. But this, to find if the pockets are empty, that's extraordinary.
Yeah, yeah. I had those experiences of finding things. I found a $20 bill as a kid once, and that was pretty exciting. But see, I don't remember that really. I didn't even think of it once. I found a really cool mechanic's hammer of some kind, stuff like that. But this is what really stays with me.
Mhm. Wow. You
So
use the word free or freedom.
freedom, yeah, yeah. That was the feeling I had. Yeah, I think basically
Very,
joy,
very,
know.
very powerful.
Yeah. So I think it may have been a boot in my spiritual rear, you might say. It was an awakening of some kind. I wasn't looking for it. It just happened. I don't know.
Well,
Or anything.
I certainly appreciate that story very much.
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad to share it. I mean, I think, yeah. Oh, some others have stories too. Yeah.
I, for one, am very glad you shared that story, because I had this feeling that, okay, after the big preamble that I gave, that maybe nobody had anything that they wanted to say. So this saved me.
Yeah, that could help. Yeah, don't.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I don't want to move on until other people who might have a story they'd like to share have a chance to do it. So if you have an account that you'd like to share, this would be time to do it. And if not, then that's fine as well.
I'd like to share a story.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Just recently I moved from a small town to the Santa Fe, which is the larger city. And I noticed driving, because the driving is so different. There's so many more cars and roads.
Mhm.
And so at every intersection, more or less, there's unhoused or homeless people that stand waiting to receive money from any car, and the cars are going rather fast and stopping and starting, and I see these people, and it reminded me to always have extra coins or a dollar bill right ready when my car stops to give them money, and to do an offering for them to this, and they're very bedraggled compared to the cars. The cars, everyone has, seems like people just have very fancy cars here, and the cars are going fast and they're stopping and starting, and so it's a small way of practicing generosity, and it's a reminder to be grateful that I have for what I have and for what I can give, and practicing generosity. And I do see other motorists handing out bills at times, and that's always delightful. So that was just sort of a recent experience, that seeing these individuals in dire straits, wanting, just standing there in the divide with the traffic just going very quickly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, you told me one way or another, it reminded me of an experience, quite a different experience, but very powerful one that I had in Nepal many, many years ago, really close to where Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche have their monastery in Kopan. There's a large stupa, Bodha stupa, and it's always a lot of circumambulations. And it's also a place where, especially on certain holidays, poor people, like beggars or who have some diseases, they may be going there because it's a good time to be able to receive this generosity from others. And on this one occasion, I was thinking of something that Deputy Zopa Rinpoche used to say, that I can't give the exact words, but the gist of it was that looked at from one point of view, it's the people who give the money who are acting with generosity. And then that generosity is received by the poor person who then gets a few coins. And so the benefit that's taking place is from the giver to the receiver. But Rinpoche pointed out that actually, if you think about it carefully, the activity that's taking place is exactly the opposite. Because if there weren't the people there asking for money, there wouldn't be an occasion for generating the good feeling, the joy that comes from being generous. It wouldn't happen. And therefore, the gratitude is not so much from the receiver to the benefactor. The real gratitude should be felt by the benefactor to the receiver. And I remember when I first heard this from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I thought, well, I'm not so sure about that. I'm not sure that most people who practice generosity, like giving to the beggars should be grateful to the beggars. I wasn't quite sure I got my mind around that dynamic so well. But on the occasion that I was referring to, when on this one day I went down to the Bodhistupa, and I had the person who told the previous story mentioned, that it's good to have small coins or dollar bills, so you have something available to give if the occasion arises. Well, at that time in Nepal, there was a real shortage on coins. They weren't in circulation as much as usual for some reason. I don't know why. And so leading up to my trip down to the Bodhistupa, I was collecting. If I had some small coins, I collected them and held on to them, so that the next time I went to a place like the Bodhistupa, I'd have something to give. And so I went down to the stupa that day with pockets full of coins, and my intention was to give them out completely. Well, on that particular day, it turned out that there was some kind of celebration. I'm not exactly sure what. There are other holy sites in the area. There's famous Hindu holy sites and, of course, Buddhist holy sites. And so it's very possible that there was some event taking place at another religious center, some distance away from Bodha. So when I got to the stupa with this pocket full of coins, intent to giving it away, I couldn't give anything away at all because there was no one there. No one was there. It was completely vacated. And later I found out it's because there was another place, some distance away, and they all went there. And then it struck me, my ability to practice generosity is solely through the kindness of the people who receive the generosity. If there's nobody there to receive it, how can I practice generosity? Of course, the short answer is there's many different ways of practicing generosity. But if one has it in mind to make a monetary offering, and there's no one there asking for money, then all of the coins in your pocket do you no good at all. You can't buy your way into Buddhist heaven through giving giving dana, giving donations, if there's no one there to receive it. And then at that moment, suddenly, what Khepje Lama Zopa Rinpoche had said, not to me personally, it was a teaching that he had given, suddenly made sense. And over the years, I've discovered that a lot of things that I first heard, very often from Khepje Zopa Rinpoche, which on the surface seemed completely opposite to worldly understanding, worldly knowledge, to reality. Upon reflection, there seemed to be very, very true, very powerful. I hadn't thought of that particular story in a while, so thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah. You're welcome.
How do you feel? Is there something more anyone would like to offer, or we're happy to move on? I'm happy to stay with stories like this forever. But
Me too.
I have another thought on giving to panhandlers, because I mean, here in Taos, there are a lot of them here too, but I try to give them something, but I find what really seems to make the most difference, at least seems to me, is to try to meet people's eyes, to try to, you know, connect with them, be there on the same, you know, to wavelength, I guess you might, just to connect, to validate them as people, you know, like me, you know. If it weren't for the grace of God, I might be where you are, you know. You know, so anyway, a really important way of giving to, you know, to say, you know, just, I mean, this is not just $1, but hey, you know, good luck there, and I wish you well. I think I don't know, having been there myself, I know that, I mean, that kind of just recognition of you as a human being, and, you know, validating who you are is so important, so valuable. So not just on street corners, but anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, anyway, I just wanted to share that.
No, that's extremely powerful, isn't it? I know that Lama Yeshe often said, you know, when you give, no matter what it is you're giving, even just your presence, just smile.
Yeah, exactly.
That human connection is so powerful. Yeah. And a lot of people, I think, who are maybe homeless or in other kinds of destitution, I think a lot of them feel exiled from the human
Yeah, absolutely.
society.
They are.
And so, yeah, yeah. And so even a smile and a gracious word means a lot.
Yeah,
But probably a lot more than the amount of money you give, because unless you're going to lay a whole bar of gold on them,
yeah,
probably nothing you're going to give is going to make that much difference for the person. Certainly not compared to a smile, some warmth. I apologize, but I just thought of another story which has a different angle on this. I have to set it up a little bit. When I was living in Dharamsala, India, that's the same place where His Holiness the Dalai Lama lives, where I studied for a long time, and many of my teachers lived. Part of Dharamsala that I lived in was lower down on the hill, and there was a lower bazaar, and I lived near there. And then you make your way up, and eventually you come to where the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives are. And if you were to continue up, you go to McLeod Cottage, you know, the main Tibetan community, and outside of that is where the Dalai Lama lives. And then beyond that, it goes up into the Himalayan mountains, you know, the white-capped snow-capped mountains. It's a beautiful area on many different levels like that. And my neighbors were a husband and wife who I became very, very close with over the years. And very often in the morning, I would walk up with the wife. Her name was Marie, because we were both students at the library. And we would walk up together. And on the way, we passed a bunch of kind of tents, kind of not very nice tents. It's like a tent, so maybe only one or two at that place. And the people who lived there were not just beggars, they were also lepers. They had leprosy. And And it was our habit that when Marie and I would walk up, we'd always have something to give. One of the men who were there, and over the months and years, we kind of recognized each other. Marie and I recognized him; he'd recognized us. On one occasion, instead of going up together, I don't know exactly why, but Marie went up first. So she walked up separately. And then an hour or so later, I went up. And when I came to that place where the beggars were, I reached, into my pocket for something to offer. And the beggar really surprised me. He said, no, you don't have to give today. He says, your wife already gave. So he obviously thought we were married, but it was like that. We were very, very close. But it blew my mind that someone who was, in a sense, made his living out of begging would turn down an offer because he thought that the partner had already given. So it's not fair to expect the husband to give if the wife had just given. And I had always tried to see the beggars as human beings, but I think my view of it was still too far away, too far removed from reality. But when the beggar turned down the coins because he thought that my wife had already given, then I realized this person is not a beggar. This person is a real, complete human being. You can't predict what a person like that is going to say or think, because any picture we have of this person reduces his reality. It's reductive. It's not taking into account that this is a person who has a whole range of feelings and sensibilities and things like that. And that experience really, really shook me for a long time. Oh, I was looking around to see the clock, and I see that we've come down to the last 15 minutes of our time together. So I hope you didn't mind that we spent all that time telling stories. For myself, I find true stories that convey reality, convey dharma in so much more immediate way than a formal teaching. But I had made a promise that at the conclusion of this time together, I would offer as an example a kind of homegrown prayer for the swift return of Kapche Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And as I mentioned earlier, I phoned to John. I don't make this offering thinking that it's in any way superior to the wonderful poems that have been written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and Kadrola, and Jada Rinpoche, and the others who have written their own prayers of praise of Kapche Zopa Rinpoche and the request that he return quickly. Their prayers are magnificent and very, very powerful. I only offer it because I've discovered that a lot of times people sit back and repeat the words of someone else, even some exalted being like the Buddha, like the Dalai Lama. But because it isn't their own words, there can be a certain distance between the meaning meant to be conveyed by the words, the very powerful Dharma meaning in there. There may be a disconnect between that expression and an interior feeling. And so I remember I was attending this course once. Somebody instituted the practice that at each day's teaching, some student would do the motivation. And that you go around and everyone would have a chance to do that. And a lot of people were kind of nervous. They didn't like to speak in public. And they have the example of all the great motivations led by Khepji Zopa Rinpoche and things like that. But it almost always happened. I would actually say it always happened that when a person spoke from their heart what they felt, that even if their words were halting, even if it didn't convey, all the various points of the Dharma in proper order, but if it was true to their own experience, it meant so much to everybody. It meant so much to the person being put in a position to express it, and it meant so much to the other fellow students to listen to it, to be inspired by it. And so as the days went on, and more people had a chance to do that motivation in the beginning, and I think it was extended maybe into the dedications at the end, this became a very, very powerful teaching, because none of the people participating, or almost none of the people, were professional speakers. As far as Dharma practice, we were all very new. But being, in a sense, forced, or having the chance to give words to inner feelings, brings out something which can be extremely powerful. So what I wanted to offer today, for what it's worth, was a poem that I had originally wrote 3 years ago on the occasion of a very, very large long life puja being offered for Khepji Zopa Rinpoche. So that was in 2020. I think it was the main practice was held in Kopan, I believe. But people were, enabled to participate in so many different ways, and through their own practices in relationship to that. And so I thought, what better offering to make than a long life prayer for Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And so instead of copying somebody else's prayer, I just tried to write what I could. So I was really only able to use a prayer like that for 3 years, because after 3 years, then Khepji Zopa Rinpoche showed the aspect of passing away. So it's not really kosher to give a long life prayer for someone who's dying, or who has died. But there was something about the prayer that still was meaningful to a few people. So then I thought, well, maybe I'll just change the long life prayer into a swift return prayer. And maybe some people will like it, and even better than some people liking it, because that's ego and pride doing a lot of the speaking when I say something like that. And of course, I try to put that to the side. Even better than that is just to get in touch with one's own feeling. Why would I myself personally wish the Kepche Zopa Rinpoche return quickly? And to answer that question, we have to really focus on what he means to us, what he has meant to us, what he will mean to us when he returns. So simply with the wish that by putting it out there, it might inspire others to make expression of their own gratitude to everything that we receive from Kepche Zopa Rinpoche, everything that we hope to receive from him in the future when he reappears. It's with that that I'd like to read this poem. So we have it on the screen there. So I'll read it, and if I feel compelled to give a little commentary, I'll give it. But if I'm a little bit more disciplined, I'll just try to read it without adding too much to it. For the swift return of our beloved Guru, Kepche Zopa Rinpoche. May the incomparable spiritual friend, who is more precious than a wish-granting jewel, hear our heartfelt prayers and quickly return to guide us along the path you yourself have tread. Although you have taught us again and again that the so-called pleasures of samsara are nothing more than suffering in disguise, still we remain addicted to these transient illusions, grasping onto them as if they were real. O Guru, please be patient with short-sighted beings like myself and continue to reveal the truth behind samsara's lies, until all of us come to realize that there is no essence at all in any of the objects of worldly desire. Although you have taught us again and again, and that phrase again and again I've put in several times because we know that the word Zopa means patience. It was extraordinary how patient Lama Zopa was, giving the same teaching over and over and over and over again, realizing only by doing that could it penetrate such as thick skulls such as mine. Although you have taught us again and again that despite appearances, nothing exists from its own side, and the hallucination that it does is what traps us perpetually in unsatisfactory existence. O Guru, please be patient with thick-headed beings like myself, who return empty-handed in the jewel island of Dharma, having repeatedly heard the words of your teachings, but have failed to realize their essential meaning. Although you have taught us again and again that cherishing ourselves is the falsest of friends, promising the fulfillment of our innermost desires, yet condemning us to perpetual frustration instead. O Guru, please be patient with slaves of selfishness like myself, who fail to learn from your perfect example that service to others is the only source of true happiness, the only cure for the miseries of the world. O Guru, who never tired revealing the path to awakening to those who, like myself, remain addicted to sleep. Please be patient with all our shortcomings and return to us again until all beings are free. And if anyone in the coming days and weeks feels inspired to put your own thoughts and emotions about the wish we that you open the chair to return quickly, to express it in those moments. But I know that there are many, many people who benefit from anything that you care to say or not. Yeah. So I think that's it for today. I managed to avoid, once again, talking about offerings, which was supposed to be the topic. And maybe I can avoid it next week as well. But there were a few things I wanted to say. Maybe I'll get to it, but maybe I won't. That's part of the uncertainty of samsara. So thank you for your kind invitation and for the participation this evening. I very much enjoyed the stories that you shared with us. Thank you very much. And my gratitude goes to John and Eloise. Also a special mention I'd like to make to Mary Jo. I received a very, very sweet email from her earlier in the week. I want to acknowledge her. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you so much, John.
Thank you, John. And I thought our class was very much about offerings, different light.
Yeah.
Just
Thank
saying.
you for sharing your beautiful prayer.
Yes,
Yes. Thank you.
very.
Thank you.
Yeah, went right to the heart of the matter, I thought. Yeah. Our blockheaded self-cherishing selves.